You'll have to check for me just to make sure. Come on. Huh? Okay, here we go. Thought I had it and then I lost it. Okay. All right, so let's get to this. Happy Monday. All right, so come on, we can make it 5 days, right? 5 days, spring break, a chance to kind of get a second wind so that we can bring it on home this semester. So close to the finish line. What, for spring break? Yeah. So yeah, spring break officially starts Monday. But yeah, so we don't come back until, hold on, the 5th, Monday the 5th, April 5th. I think that's right. Because we've got all next week, and then that Sunday is Easter Sunday, and we come back on Monday. So anyway, it's coming, right? So a good break, good long break is coming. We just got to make it through this week. And hopefully you will enjoy our topic for the week. It is World War II. We're going to spend the majority of this week getting into the beginning of the war and the U.S.'s entry into the war. And the U.S. doesn't enter until 1941, the attack on Pearl Harbor. Even though we know what's going on overseas, we are watching what is going on overseas, we do get into wartime production, which again is what's going to pull our economy out of the Great Depression. So we're going to talk about all those pieces. We'll hit the pause button. And then after we come back from spring break is where we will start to wrap up as we look at how the war ends in Europe, how the war ends in the Pacific. And we'll talk about it in the idea of hemispheres, how we have not just a war in Europe, but we've got a war on 2 different continents. Being in the Pacific, dealing with Japan, and then being in Europe and dealing with Italy and Germany and all the things. Okay, so a couple of quick things before we get into it officially. So one thing, and I don't know if you guys saw the email, I'm thinking that either Ms. Paris or Mr. Wheat sent this out, that this week is Health and Wellness Week. So one of the things you'll see is like your bell ringer activities for this week in Google Classroom. So you check that out at your leisure. Is I think there's a quick little video, and then there's a form for you guys to fill out, you know, what are your future goals, things like that. So if you will, take care of that throughout the week, and that'll be our bell ringer check-in. So no official bell ringers for us in class. I feel like I'm forgetting something. Okay, anyway, we'll get to it. All right, I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to get into the info. I do strongly suggest that you write down these leaders and the countries they correspond with, especially because it's the first question in your ID and SQ sheet. So either make a note of it in your packet of notes, go ahead and write it down beside of number 1 on your ID sheet. That is one of the first things we're going to look at, because you need to know the people and the countries they are associated with. And if you've ever done any of the wars classes, whether you've done it with Trogdon or somebody else in the past, then this should be a nice review for you. And if you haven't, unfortunately, we just don't have a lot of time to spend on, you know, these wars. I mean, we literally could take a whole month to go over World War II by itself, and we just don't have the time because we're getting ready to be, after this week, in the last 6 weeks, and we're only in the 1940s. So we got a ton of stuff still to cover and a very short time in which to do it in. All right, so let's talk about what's going on, some of the specifics about what's happening. So obviously here in the United States, we're still focusing on the Great Depression. We're going to revert back. What foreign policy are we going to revert back to? We did this after or during World War I. Yeah, we're going to revert back to isolationism. Again, it does not directly affect us in the very beginning because we are a whole entire continent and ocean away. We are focusing on ourselves because we're still experiencing the Great Depression. We are watching very closely what is happening. Again, our heart goes out to, just like this political cartoon says, our heart goes out to our friends and our allies overseas. Hands across the sea, yes. Arms across the sea, no. We are not prepared, especially in the early to mid 1930s. We are not prepared to get involved physically by sending the military. So we do establish what we call a good neighbor policy, that unless we are pushed, unless something happens to our neighboring country, Central and South America, unless something happens here, unless American lives are lost, we are not going to interfere. We are not going to intervene. We do create the Neutrality Act of 1935 that forbids arms sales to warring nations, which actually is going to be a packet question we'll get to in a minute. 1937, Roosevelt gives his quarantine speech. We understand the idea of quarantine very well right now, that we are isolating ourselves, we are quarantining the US and staying out of things. But again, we do see the opportunity to make money. But here's the hitch. The hitch is that we're not going to sell anything to countries that are at war. So when we see Japan making moves, when we see Germany and Italy making moves, we say, nope, I'm sorry, according to our Neutrality Act, we cannot sell you anything. So that's kind of how we get away from being, one-sided, only selling to our friends and allies. All right, so here it is. Here's the one I was telling you about that is going to answer number 1 on your ID sheet. And you don't have to give a description. I just want you to give the person's name and the country they're associated with, okay? You'll hear these names over and over if you don't know them already. So we're going to start with what's happening in the Pacific. It's actually, you actually need to back it up. 1932 is when Japan goes into Manchuria, and then 1937 is when they invade the mainland, the whole mainland of China. So Japan, just kind of a quick recap as far as geography goes. Japan is an island nation, so they are limited on their natural resources. Well, they look right next door. Their next door neighbor is China, which has a ton of natural resources, land, raw materials, a good trade market. So they almost see China as like this little baby gazelle that's weak, and they just feel like, you know what, we can jump in, take it over. No big deal, all right? But as soon as they do that, we're going to cut them off from trade, which causes problems later on. So here's our player that you need to remember. Emperor Hirohito for Japan. So again, just list it out. Japan, Emperor Hirohito. Make sure you know the players. His right-hand man is going to be Tojo. We won't talk about him a whole lot, but Emperor Hirohito is the guy to remember. And then we see what's happening over in Germany and what's happening in Italy. All these countries are having to repair themselves after World War I. A lot of countries, we notice, are going to take the easy way out. It is easier for a dictator to come in and just start calling the shots and start putting the pieces of the country back together. And that's why so many countries just kind of fall to it so easily. They just want somebody to do it. Somebody to come in, take over, and fix what has been broken. In Italy, again, make sure that you write this down, Italy, and then the leader is Benito Mussolini. The biggest thing with Italy is that Italy is almost trying to reclaim what it originally had. I mean, if you go back to when you took world history, and you talked about how Italy was this massive empire, go back to the Roman Empire. I mean, it was this massive, wealthy nation. And that's what Mussolini tells the people. He says, I want to take us back to our prior glory days of being an empire. So he tries to convince, and he does, he convinces the people that he is going to take Italy back to its glory days, takes over using extreme nationalism, again, uses terrorism to control everybody. You know, if you're scared to do something, you're not going to make a move. And we also see this pop up in Germany as well. Again, we know Germany is politically, socially, and economically just completely collapsed after World War I. Same thing. They're looking for a strong leader to come over and build them back up. Again, Germany used to be a great empire back in the day. So Hitler comes in with this Third Reich. They take over in the early 1930s. He is known as the Die Führer, the leader. Again, I apologize, my German's not that great. But He comes in with the German Nazi party, again, extreme nationalist. They are going to rule through threats, terrorism, again, using scare tactics to completely take over. And last but not least, so you should have four altogether. You got what am I saying? Start with Japan. Japan, Emperor Hirohito. All right. Then we got Italy and Mussolini, Germany and Hitler. And last but not least is Russia, which you need to make sure that you know they have a name change. They are now the USSR. And we've got Joseph Stalin who comes in, and I'm going to move this to look at Stalin's stuff. And here's what's really interesting. So we've always been an ally with Russia, and we almost build kind of like this frenemy situation. We don't like they have now fallen to communism. However, we still are going to use them as an ally, and everything kind of goes south after World War II. But again, we're not there yet as far as the Cold War goes. So Stalin comes in. A lot of people don't kind of look over or don't realize what exactly Stalin did and how bad a bad guy Stalin was. He is going to do purges in his own country. We have somewhere around 5 million that we know of that were sent to labor camps. They ration food. They build industrial centers. They, again, do their own purges. So a lot of times the bad that Stalin does is kind of overshadowed because everybody has Hitler in the main picture. And we're looking at what Hitler does, especially during the Holocaust, not to mention all the deaths during the actual war. But we look past what it is that Stalin does, because again, we associate Stalin with being an ally with Great Britain and France and the United States, and don't look so much at what all he does during World War II. Well, and before. Okay, all right, so again, let's talk about those little pieces of the puzzle that lead up to the actual declaration of war. One of the many words we're going to talk about is the idea of appeasement. Appeasement means we're trying to make happy, right? We are trying to prevent another world war. And in an effort to try and prevent another world war, we're trying to appease Hitler, make a compromise, right? Kind of meet in the middle on things. So let's back up just a little bit. One of the main causes behind World War II, is how World War I ends. Remember with the Treaty of Versailles, we're going to blame Germany. We kind of, chip them apart. We take land and territory that was originally theirs. And that's exactly what Germany's going to start doing, is they're going to start trying to put the pieces of what used to be their great empire back together. And he's going to do it really slow. Again, it's almost kind of like that black fog in scary movies. Like he's kind of like doing it slowly. And it's not that people don't notice what he's doing. It's just everybody's really hoping that he'll just stop and quit, and the inevitable won't happen. And the inevitable being the idea of another world war. So we had created the Kellogg-Briand Pact, again, outlawing war. I told you, you might as well just cut that up and use it for toilet paper, because that's not going to be able to last. The Hoover-Stimson Doctrine says we refuse to recognize lands that are taken by force. Again, Germany, Hitler, the Nazi Party, they don't care about any of this. They're going to continue on. Again, that's literally what Hitler does, is that he tears up the Treaty of Versailles. They do not acknowledge it. Early 1930s, 1933, they start to kind of ramp up their idea and put it in place. They rearm themselves, and by 1936, Hitler is ready to make moves. And again, he's going to start putting the puzzle pieces back together. He takes the Rhineland, which is a border strip of land right there in between them and Belgium. So he starts taking these pieces of land back. Takes that in 1937. He goes after Austria next, Austria and a piece of Czechoslovakia. And then here's where France and Britain step in and like, all right, now hold up just a minute. This is the Munich Peace Conference. Hold up, wait just a minute. Let's compromise. Again, we're trying to do anything and everything to prevent another world war. So they agree. How about this? How about you keep the Rhineland that you've already taken, And how about you keep, which actually a lot of Austrians were okay with him taking Austria back. How about you keep what you have taken between Austria, Sudetenland, and Czechoslovakia? But then you promise to stop, and that be it. You know, and that's kind of like Hitler's crossing his fingers behind his back, and he's like, sure, no problem. I'll stop there. We're good, right? I mean, who wouldn't? Who wouldn't just say, yeah, we got a deal. No big deal. I mean, he's already got his plan. He knows what's coming next. So that's what they agreed to. And then again, he's going to continue on with his plan anyway. He is going to make a lot of mistakes. And one of those mistakes is a promise he's going to, or a deal he's going to come up with Stalin over Poland. And that, let's see. Okay, all right, let me flip back to the Pacific one more time before we get ready to hit a pause button. So quick review, all right. The Japanese in the early 1930s took over Manchuria, again invading mainland China in 1937. We're all watching these things happen while we rely on being isolated. Germany again annexes Austria in 1938, takes Czechoslovakia. Again, we try to appease him and promise he'll stop. We don't know about this secret treaty, though. I just told you that he goes and speaks with Stalin next. They come up with a secret treaty, the non-aggression treaty, because Stalin, same thing, very similar to Hitler's ideas. He has a plan in place for what he would like to see for the USSR and their empire. And they agreed to split Poland. Well, here's the thing. Hitler doesn't plan on sharing. He's not a sharer. He doesn't plan on sharing. So he actually, September 1st of 1939, will attack Poland. 3 weeks, takes over the whole entire country in 3 weeks. In 3 weeks. Now, as soon as he attacks on September 1st of 1939, the allies of France and Great Britain see this take place. They go ahead and declare war on September 3rd. But again, like I said, Hitler is already on his way. It takes him 3 weeks to take over all of Poland. Obviously, as soon as Stalin realizes that Hitler did not mean to share, the Soviet Union will also declare war on Germany as well as Italy. So we've kind of set the stage for what has happened as far as the war in Europe. So we have the Axis powers, the bad guys, if you will. The bad guys being Italy and Germany, but we also refer to Japan as being another Axis power. And here's an interesting thing. The idea that Hirohito and the Japanese are very similar with their ideas that Hitler and Germany are, with the idea of there being a master race, that Hirohito believed that the Japanese were the superior Asian race, and very much had a very similar idea that Hitler does with his idea of the Aryan race being the perfect race. Okay, let's see. I might hit the pause button after we talk about this. Again, here's some more German. Blitzkrieg. The biggest thing is making sure you know what it means. It just means lightning warfare. So the Germans had created a very decisive and successful plan of being able to use these big Panzer tanks and being able to use their armed forces to quickly attack. They had bombers coming from the air. They had tanks and even machine guns on sidecars of motorcycles along with their military. So they had heavy use of both machinery and air force. Again, lightning warfare is the idea they come in, they attack, they hit you as hard and as fast as possible. They hit you so fast that you don't even know what has actually happened until you're in it. So quick, here it is, quick victory over Poland. It takes 3 weeks. The Pony War begins. There's a stalemate in the very beginning, but here's the thing. They attack, next they set their sights on the French. And here again, just like in World War I, we are going to see a war on two fronts, the Western Front and the Eastern Front. The Eastern Front is going to be Germany against the Soviet Union. The Western Front is going to be Great Britain and France. But here's the thing, here's the kicker. Here's something that the rest of the world was not ready to see happen, is that as soon as the Western Front takes and sets itself up And the Germans set their eyes on France as their next target. Nobody is prepared for how fast the Germans will be able to go into France and take over, and France will fall. Nobody expects that to happen. Again, we know that Hitler is moving super fast. Here's a little side note that Stalin's kind of like in the background. He knows that, Hitler is almost like the main character and everybody's watching Hitler, but they're not so much watching what Stalin is doing. Stalin attacks Finland. He's taking his own territory while this is going on. Hitler goes after Denmark, Norway, and Belgium between April and May. But when they invade France, again, France is not prepared for how hard and how fast they will be hit. Again, another good movie, if you have not seen it, is the movie Dunkirk. Really good movie that came out several years ago. But anyway, so as soon as they enter into France and they can tell the Allies, Great Britain and France can tell that this isn't going their way, there's going to be a massive evacuation. Over 300,000 troops are getting out and going across the English Channel and trying to get to Great Britain to evacuate France. Both English and French troops are going to be doing that. France falls June of 1940. But again, to reference the movie Dunkirk, and they do an amazing job of the visual effects on this and everything. But if you can imagine, they're on the beaches of Dunkirk trying to get across the English Channel to get to Great Britain. Do you have any kind of cover when you're on a beach? Is there anything to hide under? There's no trees, there's no nothing, there's no brush, there's no jungle, there's nothing to hide behind. So these poor soldiers are literally just sitting ducks on the beaches because the Germans are up on the top of the beaches being able to look down. They've also got bombers that are flying over. I mean, it's insane, and it's is a horrible situation for these soldiers to be in. But there's a massive evacuation as we try to regroup and figure out what our next step is going to be, as one of the biggest allies has fallen. There again, you see Hitler standing in front of the Eiffel Tower in Paris, France. So that's how fast things are moving. It's not looking good for the Allies. And we realize the United States is going to be needed, and they are going to be stepping in, but it's not going to happen until after, again, American lives are lost, December of 1941. Okay, I think that's where I want to hit the pause button for today. I could keep going, but we won't get anything else done. All right, so make sure that you have your IDs and SQs. I tell you what, I might actually leave it up just in case you need to go back and reference that slide with the names on it. Back it up just a little bit. So let me keep this up because I'm pretty sure it's number 1 that goes over the people and the countries. So today is all section 1 with IDs and SQs and in your packet. We are going to look at a political cartoon that's in your packet as well. All right, number 1 says, which nations did dictators govern during the years after World War I? Let's start with Japan. Japan, you've got Emperor Hirohito. And again, there's not a lot of space. So probably up like the top corner. If you want to just make yourself a list, you don't have to actually write it out. Just, list it out. Japan, Hirohito. Italy, Mussolini. Germany, Hitler. USSR, and Stalin. So you can either write it out or just list it. Like I said, use the top part of your ID and SQ sheet to list that out. Definitely on the quiz and on the World War II test, you'll need to make sure you know the people and the countries they are associated with. All right, that's number 1. All right, number 2. Number 2 says, how did post-war conditions contribute to the rise of dictatorships in Europe? Here's what I want you to put. It was an easy solution. It was a quick fix. It was an easy solution. All these countries were in shambles politically, socially, economically. And it was just an easy fix to have somebody come in and take charge to try and fix things. Number 3, why did Americans support isolationism? Just like at the beginning of World War I. Why? Why were we okay to revert back to isolationism? A couple of reasons, actually.
Well, we need to focus on ourselves because, I mean, we're already in a depression.
There you go. You said it all in one sentence. Exactly. So we need to focus on ourselves, especially because we're still struggling with the Great Depression. Especially because we're struggling with the Great Depression. And number 4, what events caused Roosevelt to become more of an internationalist? So we're watching 2 things. Number 1, and again, you can list it out. We're watching Japan invade China. So you can just list it. Watching Japan invade China. And again, to save you time and space, you don't have to list out the territories, but I also want you to put watching Germany take territory. So 2 things. Watching Japan invade China, watching Germany take territory. And again, you don't have space to list it out, but we talked about it in the notes. They're going after the Rhinelands, Austria, Czechoslovakia, Poland, just to name a few. Okay. Alrighty. For the sake of time, I don't know that we're going to get to the IDs. If we have time, I'll come back to it. I do want to stress number 8 really quick. Number 8 with your access powers, that's the name for the bad guys. So Germany, Italy, and Japan are the 3 countries we're talking about whenever we talk about and reference the access powers. So go ahead and make yourself a note, write that down for number 8. And then if we have time, we'll come back and do those other IDs, but you might have to define those on your own. All right, grab your unit packet. There's 2 things that I want to look at today in your unit packet. We are going to do 20-1 and continue with getting in section 1 today. And then we're also going to look at your political cartoon that gets us into the beginning of World War II as well. All right, so I've made your answers pretty short and sweet so that we can discuss it and move on to other activities. So guided reading 20-1 in your packet. Section 1 says the rise of dictators. A says, what did fascists believe was necessary to achieve order in a society? Dictatorships. That's your answer. Dictatorships. They thought dictatorships were going to be the quick, fast, and easy answer. B says, how did the fascists believe that nations became great? Building an empire. Building an empire. And that's what all of these individuals, Stalin, Hirohito, Hitler, Mussolini, all these guys believed that by building their country back up and restoring it as an empire was their main mission. All right, C, why did many Italians welcome Mussolini's leadership? Well, I actually gave you the answer already. Return Italy to greatness. That's why. They were looking for someone to return Italy to greatness. Bring them back to the days when they were, again, in ancient times under the Roman Empire. They were this great, powerful, wealthy nation. So return them to greatness. D says, how did the communists establish control in the new union of the Soviet Socialist Republic? Again, USSR for short. To spread communism. Again, that's a short way to say it. That's your answer for D. Spread communism. Spread communism. So here again, Stalin is taking over territories, kind of adding to the USSR. empire, and that's essentially what he's trying to do, is to build up his own communist empire. E, what were the characteristics of the Nazi Party? The Nazi Party was focused on two things: nationalism, so write this down. Nationalism, again, restoring honor and glory to Germany. Nationalism and anti-communism. They were very anti-communist. So nationalism and anti-communism. All right, F. Adolf Hitler gained power by having Nazis elected to which party of the German government? And I'm going to spell this because I know that I am going to butcher the snot out of this. But it's the Reichstag, and that's capital R, EICHSTAG. The Reichstag, German government. And again, please forgive me for my German pronunciations. And G says, what did Japanese military leaders believe was the only way for Japan to get the resources it needed? Taking territory. And where is it they have their sights set? China, yeah. So taking territory. Again, Japan is an island nation. They are limited on their natural resources, land, etc. So taking territories where their goal is. All right, part 2, American neutrality. A says, why were Americans discouraged by the rise of dictatorships in Europe and Asia? The number one reason is they felt like, here's what you can put for your answer: failed to see change after World War I. Failed to see change after World War I. A lot of Americans were really disappointed and felt like, World War I wasn't worth it because now all these dictators are coming to power and taking over, and they're just, nobody likes to see that we or feel like we wasted money, time, and lives over something. So anyway, all right, B, what were the findings of the Nye Committee? Here's your answer. Hold on. What I wrote doesn't make sense. Hold on. Oh, here's your answer. Money arms factories made during the war. Money arms factories made during the war. And that's just another way of saying that we realize there is a benefit to war, and it's wartime production. And again, that's what gets us and our economy back up and going. So you don't like to say war is a good thing, but we did say it turns our economy around. C, after passage of the Neutrality Act of 1937, how could warring nations buy non-military goods from the United States? We call it the cash and carry policy. That's your answer. Cash and carry policy. Cash and carry policy. And it literally means what it says. You pay for it in cash, you pick it up, and you take it home. And that's kind of how we keep our hands as clean as possible, and we're still able to make money. Cash and carry policy. All right, D, what is the name for the idea that trade between nations creates prosperity and helps to prevent war? It is internationalism. That's your answer. Internationalism. The idea that trade between nations creates prosperity. Internationalism. And last but not least, E, what was Roosevelt's reason for authorizing the sale of arms to China? China had not yet declared war. So here's what you can put. China was not yet at war. That's what you can put for your answer. China was not yet at war, so therefore the Neutrality Act did not apply. China was not yet at war, even though we are going to be an ally with China once the war officially begins and the U.S. enters into the war. Okay. Now, there is one more activity we're going to look at together, and that is your political cartoon. I want to say that's like the second page in your packets is the political cartoon. And I realize I've copied the snot out of it. So it's a little faded from overuse. But it says interpreting political cartoons. It says peace above all. And this is actually the political cartoon you saw me use in the PowerPoint for today. So we're going to do a couple of questions, but I'm probably going to wait and finish the rest of it tomorrow. But we'll at least get started. All right, so here's what it says. Study the cartoon below, answer the questions that go along with it. Number 1, in the top cartoon, who is the figure on the left? Who's that supposed to represent? Uncle Sam. Yeah, so that's your answer. Uncle Sam representing the United States. So Uncle Sam. Now there's like 4 questions in one. So who is the figure? It's Uncle Sam. What is he holding? Again, I know it's hard to see, but it says U.S. life insurance policy. Write that down. U.S. life insurance policy. And the last question wants to know, what do you think it represents? The safety of American lives. That's what we can put. The safety or safekeeping of American lives. All right, we're going to do number 2 for sure, and then we might try and squeeze in number 3. All right, number 2 says, to whom is the figure in the top cartoon extending his right hand across the sea to? So who do you think that individual is supposed to be?
Churchill.
So Great Britain and Churchill, yes. So he is extending it to Great Britain, our ally, and Winston Churchill being the prime minister. Fun fact, Roosevelt and Churchill and Stalin, believe it or not, Roosevelt was good friends with all of them, actually. Fun fact. And the part 2 to that one says, how can you tell? What is it that should be a clue as to what country that individual is from? Yeah, the flag on his, I guess it's supposed to be like a vest, like he's wearing like a 3-piece suit, and that's supposed to be like his vest. So the country's flag, that's your answer. Country's flag on his vest. All right, there's 6 questions total. We're going to go ahead and squeeze in number 3 on the back of this, and then we'll have to finish the rest of it probably tomorrow. All right, question 3 says, who were the figures across the sea in the bottom cartoon? And we're not going to list it out, just put U.S. allies. So part 1 for number 3, U.S. allies, because technically speaking, it's going to be Great Britain, USSR, and France. And then it says, describe what is happening in the bottom panel of the cartoon. And this is where it says, but arms across the sea, no. So we're telling them that they have our friendship, but we are not sending what? All the above, right? We're not sending weapons, people, you know, I mean, our military is considered weapons too, you know? So write that down. We are not ready to physically enter the war. That's a good explanation. We are not ready to physically enter the war by sending over our military and weapons. Okay, all right, so hit the pause button with your packet. We'll just wait and finish that up because I'm trying to watch my time, because there is one more thing I want to talk about before I give you time to work on a few things. And again, I apologize that I didn't get paper copies of this. I don't know, I got thrown off this morning and forgot about it. All right, I'm going to bring up your learning menu because I didn't even print me off a copy of it. So let's talk about it. And it's called a menu because you have options, and we are going to make some modifications to this. So there's three pieces, and piece one being your appetizer. Your appetizer, again, we're going to make some modifications. And if you pace yourself and you work on a couple of the, work on a piece at a time, you do have to complete an appetizer, a main course, and your dessert. So it says, when completing a learning menu, each task must be completed before moving on to the next one. Therefore, both parts of the appetizer must be finished before you start the main course. The main course needs to be done before you start your dessert. So for your appetizer, there are three different activities that you can choose from. You can either do a propaganda poster, a World War II timeline, or a postcard. So that's it. It's not that painful. You pick one, whichever one sounds more appeasing to you. So let's say you chose to do a propaganda poster, which I'll show you a ton of propaganda examples probably tomorrow. Okay. Propaganda is supposed to incite some type of emotional response and get you to want to act, right? If you choose to make propaganda posters, you must create your own poster to try and change public opinion on various topics. Here's one of the modifications. It says to do 3. I'm not making you do 3. I'm just going to make you do 1. All right. So if you do propaganda poster, you're doing just 1 propaganda poster. And the size of it is like in your Google Doc or on a piece of white printer paper, just an 8x10. That's the size that you're doing for your propaganda poster. And again, you can create it on a Google Doc. You can draw it out and take a picture of it, whichever you would rather do, if that's the option you choose. So for a propaganda poster, hold on. Let's see. Be sure to make a colorful poster, eye-catching. And again, you're only doing 1, not 3. That is the modification. And on a propaganda poster, you're going to have some type of slogan and a call to action. For example, you might have a couple of kids throwing down seeds. Do your part and build a victory garden. That's an example, okay? A slogan and a call to action. Maybe you're trying to encourage people to join the military. Maybe you're encouraging people to buy war bonds. Maybe you're encouraging people to give blood to the Red Cross. I don't care, all right? But that's an example of propaganda poster. All right, let's say that doesn't sound good to you. Option 2 is doing a World War II timeline. For this assignment, you can use, we don't have an actual textbook, but you can use your Google Slides. You can use any of the World War II books that I have, or you can just Google it. Let's see. To create a timeline of key events of the war. When making the timeline, make sure that you list the year and have a brief summary of what the event is. Timelines should start at the beginning of the war and end with the war's conclusion. Be sure to make timelines colorful, easy to read. Make sure they are in chronological order. Each timeline must have at least 15 dates total, which is super easy to do. I mean, the war will last forever, so that's easy to do. Or if you don't like any of those options, then maybe option number 3 speaks to you, and you can do a postcard. Make a postcard like an index card, which I can give those to you if you want one. You're going to put a picture on the front, and on the back side is where you're going to write a letter. Paragraph length, that means 4 to 5 sentences. So write a letter, and I've given you 3 different prompts to choose from. So I'm not going to read those to you unless you have a question about one of them. But there's 3 different prompts. One of them is that you got drafted, but they found a medical problem and you couldn't, and you got to stay home instead. One is you discover and liberate a concentration camp. What's your reaction? And the third one is being over in Japan after the atomic bombs had been dropped. So you've got 3 different examples. You respond to one of those and draw a picture. Okay. That's all we're talking about today, because that's all I want you focusing on. We're not going to get to the main course. We might talk about it towards the end of the week, but we're not there yet. So use your time today to pick which one of those appetizers you would like to do, and knock it out sometime in the next few days, and then be ready for us to discuss the main course. Alrighty, I'm gonna let my online people go so I can let my in-classroom people get some work done. Any questions, comments, or concerns?
Miss Walker.
Yep.
In the packet, that word that you said for the German government, whatever it was called, can you spell it again?
Yes. Yep. Let me grab it really quick to make sure I say it right. All right. So you're talking about F.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. It's capital R EICHSTAG.
Okay, got it.
Yep. Good deal. All righty. You guys have a fabulous Monday.